Thank you for coming. This was okay. This one had problems yesterday also. Thank you for coming for this session. I'm sure it will be very interesting, especially following discussion we had early this morning, saying and asking questions about quality in context of new system of working. That's why now we'll hear, I hope, answers about also the quality in the context of computer-assisted investigative reporting. A lot of us has serious problems with a lot of data, managing it, using it efficiently, checking also the liability of it, and I'm sure that Helena Bengtsson from Swedish Television will give us answers. She's a database editor. Also, her background is investigative journalism, so she is very familiar with that, what a journalist need, and she will hopefully open up eyes what we can get from technology. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I wanted to start you off with an example. We obtained this fall a database of all the contaminated places around Sweden, and also, we got a map of all the areas that we have protected water that are meant for drinking, or water as is a reserve for drinking water. So by combining these two, putting the maps together like this, we can find contaminated places that are placed within these protected water areas. So by doing that, we found, for instance, this example. And I will show you the segment that we did from this research. So could I get the sound, please?
Ja, populär.
Ja, det är det.
Lövsta är ett av flera gamla järnbruk i Uppland där man smidde järn redan på 1500-talet. Men de gamla byggnaderna och masugnarna är rivna. Men det har legat slagghögar med giftigt innehåll lite här och var. Herrgård och bruksort är bevarade och idag bor ett 100-tal personer på orten. Och på en yta av cirka 20 fotbollsplaner gömmer sig flera 1000 kilo arsenik enligt Länsstyrelsens beräkningar.
Ja, arsenik är naturligtvis ett oerhört farligt gift, men hur ligger det idag? Är det bundet på något sätt? Är det risk att det kommer ut i grundvatten? Det är den typen av frågor som jag tycker är intressanta.
Har man svar på det?
Inte idag. Inte idag. Idag finns inga svar. Men risken är ju uppenbar, självfallet.
Men det finns brunnar i området som förorenats av arseniken. Och mätningar kring just badplatsen visar halter av cancerframkallande kolväten över gränsvärden. Och arsenik i så höga halter att det finns risk för akut förgiftning. Utredarna har rekommenderat att man ska sanera och gräva ut badplatsen. Redan 2007 hittade man höga halter arsenik vid badet. Men den ansvariga kommunledningen kände inte till provresultaten innan SVT kom.
Ja, då bör man rimligtvis göra någonting åt det också. Och där är vi beroende av statliga medel.
Men det har ni inte sökt heller i det fallet?
I det fallet har vi inte sökt statliga medel, än så länge i vart fall.
Det finns nära 1000 platser i Sverige som fått högsta riskklass för gifter som kan skada människor och natur. 86 av dem ligger i vattenskyddsområden. Och på 51 av de här platserna har man hittat föroreningar i grundvattnet. I bara 3 fall har man tagit vattenprover som är rena. Resten, där befarar man föroreningar men har inte hunnit kolla. Som här i Ed. Här finns sedan 100 år en plantskola där man använt det extremt giftiga bekämpningsmedlet DDT.
Det användes DDT, ja.
Det var så?
Ja, det använder alla plantskolor. Ja.
Även det här området är vattentäckt och 2007 skrevs en rapport om mycket stor risk för spridning till grundvattnet. Var du själv ute och spruta?
Ja, det hände.
Men enligt Länsstyrelsens databas har man inte ens börjat en förstudie av fallet.
Nej, det är omöjligt att hinna jobba med alla de här objekten på en och samma gång.
Och även om man bara kokar ner det till vattenskyddsområden, högsta riskklass, även där går det långsamt alltså?
Ja, nej, vi har inte resurser för att jobba med alla de objekten.
Och så Uppsala stadspark då. Där fanns också plantskola som troligen använt DDT. Exponering kan ske genom hudkontakt, jordintag i munnen eller inandning av damm, säger utredningen. Men man säger inget till barnen som leker och kryper på marken.
Stadsparken här i Uppsala så står det kanske DDT.
Och det var ett objekt som inventerades förra året.
Finns det DDT då?
Ja, det vet vi inte, det är inte undersökt.
Och Tärnsjö, också det vattenskyddsområde. 60 ton kromavfall från gamla garveriet finns i den lilla Tärnsjön. De närboende tycks veta att man knappast tar ett dopp i den här sjön. Men det finns ju turister.
Här ska man säga varning giftig sjö. Varning läbbig badplats. Liten skylt.
Ja, ganska svår fråga att svara på. Men när det finns risk för akuta effekter då kan det ju finnas vits med att till exempel sätta upp en skylt.
Men har ni satt upp några skyltar det sista året?
Nej, det har vi inte gjort.
Men Sursojeva kom hit som läkare från Kosovo. Men trots flera försök så klarade han inte svenska provet som krävs för läkarlegitimation.
I'm sorry.
Så
we go. So, what do? I work together with a group of people. We're journalists, but we're also developers. So we work together, and that is one of the reasons that we do this so well that we do. We work together, we sit together, developers and journalists together, and we're partly financed by our IT department, but we're placed at the news and the current affairs department, and that I think is crucial. We do basically three things. We do news applications, which is not necessarily on the mobile. They work on the mobile, but they're also on the web. That presents public data combined with surveys and present public data in a simple and accessible way for the citizen. We do a news blog where we show our visualizations, where we show statistics, where we do video. And we work together with the news. Reporters come to us to help them, and we help them with analysis of data sets for reporters, for researchers, for editors, for shorter and longer stories. And most of the things we do, since we get the databases, we usually get the databases for the whole country. So most things we do is actually portioned out locally or regionally, so that, for instance, for one national story, we will get 10 or 11 local stories around Sweden. For me, data journalism or computer-assisted reporting is basically two parts. You have the analysis part, where you look at the database, you check your facts, you draw your conclusions, and then you have a presentation part, which includes tables, interactive databases, and visualizations. So, in one way, I think it's an outdated term. We don't talk about telephone-assisted reporting, even though everybody does that. We don't talk about pen and paper-assisted reporting. And for me, using a computer, knowing how to work databases, is just a method to reach the goal. It's very important for me that I'm a journalist first. Learning these methods, learning these tools, is only a way for me to reach the goal. I have a journalistic problem. How do I solve it? I might be able to solve it by learning Excel or learning how to use a mapping program. And for me, the most important thing, most of my bosses think that I'm really good at numbers, but the really good thing about this is the details. With computer-assisted reporting, with data journalism, you can really find the details. And a couple of years back, I was standing listening to a discussion about WikiLeaks. And we had one of the senior editors in the public radio that said, this doesn't really matter. There's 390,000 documents. There's not a reporter in the world who can read 390,000 documents. And I thought, well, that depends on how you do it, because I know how to do that. You do this. You select all the documents that contain something that looks like Sweden. And suddenly, you only have to read 57 documents of the WikiLeaks Iraq war logs database. And 57 documents I know that almost every reporter I know can read. almost, I will say. I work in television, so. And one of the details that we found in these documents was this document. It's the 28,658th document. So if I had to do it the way the editor told me, I had to read 28,657 documents. This is about a guy, he gets caught in a checkpoint in Baghdad. He's a Swedish citizen, he has an Iraqi passport, and he was detained for suspicious activity. And we could, since we had his name, we could find him. He works at a local car shop in Gothenburg, and we could interview him and do his story. And that is one of the best stories I know out of the WikiLeaks database, because it's a detail that we found. If you go back to the analysis part, I would say that a lot of it is just simple analysis. Being able to sort an Excel file, being able to do simple calculations is something that I believe every reporter should be able to do, local or national reporter. This is a story we did a couple of years back about doctors who come to Sweden, and if you're a doctor educated in a country outside of the EU, you're not allowed to practice medicine in Sweden without the authorities giving you the go. So these were doctors asking for their medical license in Sweden. And we got this Excel file. Each color represents all the correspondence between the doctor and the authorities. And with very easy knowledge of Excel, you can put all the information, all the necessary information in one row, so that you will have the date when the first application came along in one column, and the last date where the application was approved in another column, and then you just calculate the days. And by calculating the days, you can see that we had, in some cases, doctors who had waited 24 years to get their license to practice medicine. So we will see if we can watch that story, maybe.
Men Sursojeva kom hit som läkare från Kosovo. Men trots flera försök så klarade han inte svenska provet som krävs för läkarlegitimation. Så han gick på socialbidrag och tog de jobb han fick.
Jag har jobbat med potatis. Jag har jobbat med plockat jordgubbar. Bengtsson, flyttfirma.
Socialstyrelsen, som är ansvarig myndighet, vet inte hur många utländska läkare som har det så här, vad man kan göra för att underlätta eller ens hur lång tid det tar för läkarna att få svensk legitimation.
Vi vill att det ska ske en lösning, att vi kommer framåt i den här frågan.
Men vore det inte bättre om ni till att börja med visste hur lång tid det tar?
Det är en fråga självfallet som är intressant. Men Socialstyrelsen äger ju en liten del av den biten.
Men den biten ni äger vet ni inte hur lång tid den tar?
Den möter vi inte idag.
Och varför inte det?
Det kan jag inte svara på.
Rapport har kartlagt de 181 läkare från länder utanför EU som fick sin svenska legitimation förra året. Och för dem har det tagit mellan 1 och 24 år att få sin legitimation. Genomsnittet är 4 år. För att få svensk legitimation måste man efter svenska provet göra ett medicinskt test. Eller som specialistläkare ett halvårs provtjänstgöring. Men man måste ordna praktikplatsen själv.
Och jag började ringa. Hela Skåne. Vårdcentralerna.
Men Sursojeva antecknade varje vårdcentral han ringde i flera år.
Kiruna-området. Jokkmokk till exempel. Jag ringde från 25 maj 2006 till 2009. Hela den boken jag ringde. Nästan varje dag. På datorn och ringde. Okej, idag ska jag få till exempel Falkenberg. Imorgon ska jag få Halmstad. Imorgon ska jag få... jag ringde.
Trots att vården idag desperat behöver fler läkare är den så hårt pressad att det saknas tid att handleda läkare på praktik. Det säger prodekanus Jan Ygge på Karolinska, som har en kurs för utomeuropeiska läkare.
Det är det som vi får höra hela tiden, för det är det som vi har svårt alltså att ordna verksamhetsförlagd utbildning, det vill säga praktikplatser för de här studenterna.
Men Sursojeva fick efter 3 års sökande en praktiktjänstgöringsplats. Idag jobbar han som läkare i Askersund. Men processen tog 14 år.
Men är det inte ditt ansvar då att det har tagit sån här lång tid?
Nej, jag tror det var en del ansvar. Men inte helt. De bara säger tyvärr, vänta. Jag tror det finns här i Sverige lite, hur man kan säga, byråkrati.
So, we also can do simple presentations by using maps. This is a database I got, or an Excel sheet really, that I got from the local roads and vehicles agency about traffic cameras. Do you have traffic cameras? Those horrible things that stand on the road and catch you when you drive too fast? Well, they catch a lot of people in Sweden, and I got this Excel spreadsheet with the coordinates of where each camera is located. So I could send out a reporter and say, this is the camera that catches the most. And I could also make a map out of all of Sweden, and we actually also divided this data out into the local regions, so they could do stories about the cameras in their regions. And as you can see, this map took me maybe an hour to make, and we could put that on the web and let people click and see how many people get caught in the cameras where I live. This is another interesting map. I like it because it's so beautiful. It's the Los Angeles Times who made this spring a map about election results, where they let each point represent a voter. It's of course not where the voter lives, but it's within the area. So you could see here how the different, this is for the mayoral election, and you can see where the different sympathizers live out through LA. And you can also click on a certain area and see exactly the percentage of the different candidates from the different areas. If we do a little bit more advanced analysis, I did for a couple of years ago, I wanted to check out how Swedish lobbying works, and we have no disclosure whatsoever, no tracking of lobbyists, no tracking of lobbyist activities, nothing like that. So I got the idea to get, you know, when you visit the parliament, you have to sign in. So I got the idea to get the sign-in sheets from the parliament, and I FOIA'd the sign-in sheets, and they decided to give it to me only in paper documents. Maybe I should have stopped there, but nothing stops me when I get an idea. So I got the papers, I ran them through a scanner and turned them into Excel. And when I started looking at them, I saw that there were very little, what should I say, there were very few lobbying firms on there. There were just the names. As you can see, there are big white holes where the company names should have been. So what do you do then? Well, you go to the websites of the big lobbying companies in Sweden, and they like to brag about their employees because their employees are their capital. So you see all their employees here. We're going to look at Emily because she has a very unusual name, which is a good thing in this case. So what I did was that I went to the websites of the 10 biggest lobbying companies. I gathered all the names and put the names in one table. We have all the visits in another table, and we just connect them. We match them on names, and then there's an advantage that the lobbyist has an unusual name. So by doing that, I found several visits by Emily. In none, she identifies herself as a lobbyist, but we could still follow and do a story about this and how politicians, and let me stress that lobbying is everywhere. I think that we do our fair amount of lobbying ourselves as public broadcasters, and there's nothing wrong in that, but the point that we wanted to make in this segment was that it should be disclosed, that we as journalists should be able to see which companies, which organizations that are doing the lobbying in Sweden or the rest of the world. Another interesting method that we've been trying a lot lately is crowdsourcing, and I'm blaming The Guardian for that. The Guardian did an amazing crowdsourcing where they looked at the members of parliament and their expenses. And what they did was that they got a huge amount of documents, about 500,000 of documents, about different receipts and payments that the members of parliament had asked a return from the parliament. So what they did was that they built a web form, I'm sorry this is such a blurry form, where you could look at the paper that the member of parliament had given in. This is incidental expenses, for instance, from Stephen Pound. And as a visitor to the website, you could mark it as interesting or not interesting. And if a document got enough interesting marks, it was sent on to the journalists. Well, this is now spread, I think, all over Europe. This is an example from Finnish Yle, where they asked people, where do you feel unsafe? And they made a map from all over the Swedish part of Finland, or the part of Finland where people speak Swedish, I should say. And you could see that this is, for instance, a place where an old man in his between 60 and 69 has said that people drive too fast here, so I'm afraid for my life when it's dark. So you could do these kinds of things. We did a collaboration with a very popular TV show in Sweden called Crime of the Week, and they wanted to examine how does the police treat people that come to them with everyday crime, like breaking into their house or stealing their car or stealing their bike, stuff like that. And we were asking the public what happened when you contacted the police about this. And we built a database interface on the web so that we could easily sort through these and also very easily divide them up geographically, because for us it was very important that we could do local stories about this. In total, we got about 3,000 tips, which is pretty big for Sweden. And we did at least 25 news stories out of this and a couple of segments on this TV show. So this is the form where you could choose which crime it was. You could tell us in what part of Sweden the crime was committed, which was very important for us. And we also asked for contact information, and we stressed, of course, that we're not going to publish your contact information. But that was a gold mine when we wanted to do the stories, of course. And most people that we contacted were happy to talk to us because they were so angry with the police and how they were treated. So this is the database, and as you can see, I've divided it up, or maybe you can't see because it's in Swedish, but as you can see, I've divided it up so that each story is attached to one of the regional offices that we have, so that we very easily could just divide it out to them. And they did, the bulk of the stories that were done in this project were done by our regional stations. And at the end of it, we put the chief of police of Sweden in between the hosts of this TV show, and he got a lot of explaining to do by doing this. Another way of working using methods for journalism is to use programming. And this is a short, just a thing. I had a reporter coming to me saying, I found this great statistics on the web, she said. This is how the difference is between boys and girls when it comes to the grade they get when they graduate from 9th grade, which is the highest compulsory grade in Sweden. I want to do a story, she said, where I compare how girls and boys are, how the results for them, how the grades for them. But I want to do it from 2 different municipalities in Sweden, but since I only get one travel, they have to be close together. The problem with this statistic was that it showed just one municipality at a time, and we have about 290 of them in Sweden. So I called up the agency and I said, I would like the database behind this web, behind the web here. And they said, well, we've chosen to show the statistics in this way. And I said, well, it's really hard to compare between municipalities if you show it this way. Well, we've chosen to show the, and so on. And we had that conversation for a while, and then I went home, and at night I noticed, when I looked into this, I noticed that every URL, every web address of every municipality was exactly the same, except for a number in the end, which was the code for the municipality. So I could make very easily a list of all the municipalities, and then I could write a small program that goes through that list and collects the data from each municipality. And in the morning, I could get to my reporter and I could say to her, this is the table you wanted. Now you can choose for yourself which communities, which municipalities you want to go to. Okay, I think I'm going to skip this because I'm running a little late, and talk about our data visualizations. As I said earlier, we work very closely to developers, and one of our developers is I would say, the best in Sweden of doing visualizations. This is, for instance, one we did where we got, which you could say, really boring statistics. We got statistics about which income has the Swedes had over a number of years from 1991 to 2010. And we got it for women and men. We got it from different regions. And we got from different ages. So this, for instance, is the income in 2010. As you can see, it's pretty widespread. We have a couple of rich over here. And we have about 5%. Each little figure here is 1% of the population. About 5% of the population actually don't earn a thing. And if you look at how it was in 1991, you can see that we were a much more condensed population. Almost everybody earned the same thing. That was the era of the Swedish equality, I think. And by having this, we could also do an interactive visualization where you could choose to visualize, for instance, the income between men and women, or between different years. So here we have young people 2005 in yellow and young people in 2010 in blue. And you can see that the number of young people, even though we have about the same amount of students in 2005 and 2010, there's still a huge increase when it comes to the people with really low incomes or no income at all. This is another statistics where we looked at this is from the schools project, where we have the green lines are the results of pupils that have parents that are very educated, that have a high education. The yellow one, they have medium education, and the red ones, these are the results of students where parents have no university education at all. So as you can see, this is for Stockholm, for instance. You can see that it's this is the sad thing, is that it says it doesn't really matter what school they go to. If your parents have a high education, you're a winner. If your parents our school system doesn't have the ability to lift the pupils up to a better grade. Unless in some cases where you can see that there are a couple of red lines that are going over the black line here is the medium grade point average for every student in Sweden. And in some cities you have a more significant pattern, whereas Malmö, who is in the south of Sweden, some of you might have been there last year, where the pattern is much more significant. We've also done a salaries comparison, men compared to women. You can see that in lawyers, actually, women earn more than men, but you could see, and if we look at, for instance, doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, you can see that the lower income groups, they earn about the same, no matter if they're men and women, whereas at a higher education you get, the bigger difference is between men's salaries and women's salaries. And here you could choose any occupation you wanted, and you can divide them up between men and women. And so this was also an interactive visualizations. This one we're actually broadcasting on Tuesday, so please don't go home and steal this one. And it is about the scarcely populated parts of Sweden. This is a way of showing this is Sweden, but if we made a map from the population, Sweden would actually look like pregnant Norway, which is Stockholm and the south, where we have all the people living, and up north there are very few people living. There are visualizations. The company that does this absolutely the best is the New York Times, who did, just before the election, this one that shows the different ways that Romney and Obama could take going to the White House. And this amazing one, if you haven't looked at this one, this is actually a movie, but it's based on these people that you see here are all the people who won medals in the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics. So you can see that Usain Bolt over there, he's the winner. The one who won in 1896, right? The first Olympics. He wouldn't have a chance from Usain. He wouldn't even get out of the start, get away from the start before Usain already had won. This is an amazing one, so Google that and look at it because it's a really good one. The last thing I want to talk about is the news applications that we do. And we like to look at it as a journalistic service to our citizen. It's taking complicated data, complicated public data, and presenting it to our citizens in such a way that they can learn more from it. If that isn't public service, I don't know what. But it's very important. We work very closely with the developers. For me, as a journalist, I have to have enough technical knowledge to be able to discuss with them. And there are a lot of discussions between us. But we also have to have developers that have a keen interest in society, who are willing to discuss what we are putting up, and we usually have a large discussion about this. And these are always used as the whole of SVT. This is done in responsive design, which means that we design all the news applications for the mobile first. It should work on the mobile, it should work on the iPad, and it should work on the web, of course. And last but not least, for me, it's very important that we just don't do a database. We also look for stories in the database. So this is an example from outside of SVT. This is Dollars for Ducks from ProPublica in New York, where they collected data about doctors, all the payments and travel and hotel and that sort of thing that the doctors got from the medical companies. They collected that from all the medical companies, and you can actually go to their website and see if your doctor has received money from the drug companies or not. We've done a couple of these. All of them are called PALE because that's our little group. The first one we did was the election data. It's almost 4 years ago now. We have an election next year. We've already started thinking about what we should do. It actually had 3 pieces. It had a compass for the visitor. The visitor answers a number of questions of political issues, and by the end of the compass, by the end of the survey, the compass tells you in what way you sympathize with the different political parties of Sweden. We got data of it was 54,000 people running for election in Sweden that year, local, regional, and national election. For them, we got data from the Swedish election agency. We got their income, because income is actually a public data in Sweden. We got if they sat on any company boards, or if they had a cell phone company, and we got other data from them. So by doing this, we could do, this is the compass, this is about tolls when driving into the city. Is this a good suggestion, a fairly bad suggestion, or a very bad suggestion? And we have the candidates. This is one of the candidates from my hometown. He had a salary of 493,000 krona in 2008, which was the last income in that year. He's 69 years old. He's a member of these boards, for instance. By putting that together and also sending a survey out to the candidates, we made an interactive database where you could go and just look up your candidates and see what did they think. But by doing the survey, by doing the compass, you also got, for instance, the person who's done this survey is by 59% agreeable with the woman who is running for the Feminist Party here, the candidate for the Feminist Party here. So you could see for every candidate that you visited, you could see in what way you agreed on the issues, in how much you agreed on the issues with this person. Our first real project was the crime statistics of Sweden. The most important thing there is to localize the information. What happens where I live? This is the burglaries of Halmstad. It's average when it comes to compare to other counties in Sweden, and the trend is going down, as you can see over the years. We did an application, news application about schools. We could look at schools where you live. And this is my school, for instance, that I graduated from. And we could see that they're pretty much average. They're actually not that good in mathematics. They're pretty low on that. So we also use signals to make it easy for people to understand. And the last one I'm going to talk about is the first one that I talked about, which is the contaminated places. We collected data there for 21 different regions and put them together into one database. That had never been done. And actually, the Agency for Environmental Protection, in their yearly report this year, wrote that we had done this and recommended people to go there to look at their data. And we know that local communities who doesn't have access, they have responsibilities for these places, but they don't have access to the database. They actually use our database instead. So this is places that might be contaminated. We put maps and information on every site we had, and we did a number of stories, both national and local, and the one that you saw first is one of them. So we also did, for instance, a story about shooting ranges that actually got the Minister of Environment promising that there should be no shooting ranges in Sweden or they should take the lead out at least. They should be allowed to shoot, but not the lead should be taken away. So that was my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Or do you all want to go to lunch?
If there are no immediately questions, I have one.
Okay.
How big is your crew?
Good question. Thank you. There's 4 journalists of us. We have a project manager, I'm the database editor, and we have 2 data reporters researchers. And then when we build these news applications, we work together with 1 or 2 developers.
So 7 people supporting?
6 people.
Supporting whole TV station, actually.
We will do that, yeah.
And is it difficult to recruit journalists to join your crew? Do they somehow consider it not so interesting comparing to being investigator on the field, or they recognize the worth of this project, of this kind of working?
I would say that we're a very special crew, and I would say that there is only one. In Europe, we have only one other crew like this in the whole of the media field, and that's The Guardian. And even if you look at the United States, where this is more common, I would say that we are probably, if we don't count the New York Times, and you can't count the New York Times, I think that we are the largest group working with this. So it attracts a very few people, I would say. But the ones that are working with this as a specialty, they know who we are, and we actually got the guy who's doing our visualizations contacted us and said, please let me work with you. So the people who wants to work with us, then we get them.
That's great. And you, for example, of this example of 24 stories considering daily crime,
yeah.
How much time you needed to design the project?
Not that much time, actually, for that project, because we have done crowdsourcing projects a number of times, and we actually just reuse the online form that we used for that, we reuse it, we just, change the word. So I would say that we put that up in maybe a week for the journalist and maybe a couple of days for the developer. So not that much time.
And the great result came out of it.
From that great result, and we've also seen, we've done a number of those projects. We did a project on nursery schools, for instance, where we asked the public about what were there. As you know, almost every kid in Sweden goes to kindergarten. And parents sometimes feel like they have a lot of problems with the kindergarten. There are huge groups of kids. The kindergarten teachers don't look after their kids, or they, in some way. And we asked for different kinds of questions around that, and we also got a lot of stories out of that. So we've done a number of those projects where we asked the public for help, with really good results.
And is it more often that you design the story, or in most cases journalists come to you with questions and that's how the story or project goes on?
I would say nowadays it's 50-50. When we started out, almost nobody, well, I've been doing this since 1997, so most people in our newsroom knows about me, but it's just a couple of years that we've been this group. And I think when we started out, it was more us approaching them. Now I think it's about 50-50. They come to us. The nursery school project was a project where they came to us, say. The Crime of the Week project was also a project where they came to us and said, help us do this.
Any questions? Yes, please just wait a minute for microphone.
I've got two questions. The first of the questions is, do you only work with databases, or do you work also with Google? I mean, there are many stories inside Google, and sometimes journalists don't get good information there. I mean, if you support them to get good stories on Google. And second one, how do you manage with privacy with databases? I mean, there's many private information inside the databases. How do you manage that?
Well, the good thing is that the public records law of Sweden, and I think that actually is true for many European countries, it's the data directive from the EU, has an exception for journalists handling databases. So for me as a journalist, I can actually handle a database with private information in it, because there's an exception for me to do that. But of course, when you publish things, it's very important to be ethical about it. And for instance, with the environmental database, we actually made a lot of searches, because that has a lot of free text that shows, that tells about the sites. And we actually made a lot of searches into that to see that there were no names in those texts, for instance, to make sure that we didn't publish. Because ethically, even though I think that legally we could have published it, ethically you have to think about it as well. Your first question, I wasn't sure that I understood. Yeah, well, for research, not at all. For producing maps, yes, we do that. But we also use OpenStreetMap and that sort of thing. So we try to use as many tools as possible. But yes, Google Maps we use for our projects sometimes.
I have one more question.
Sure.
For example, I'm coming from Croatia, and public data which huge companies has to offer usually hides valuable information for us journalists, but it's very hard to recognize it if you're not expert. In our country, it works like that. If I get some document, I know the guy who can recognize but how it works in the system if it is well organized? Do you have some, how to say, associated group of people to your basic group helping you to recognize what can be hidden in database?
Well, we do have a statistician that works at the company that I consult with more than once to help us with that. And we also go outside of the company to, for instance, when we do the environmental project, of course, we have to talk to people at the environmental agency or environmental specialists to make sure that we don't make assumptions that are wrong. So in that matter, we do a lot of ordinary journalistic research. We have to know a lot about it's not different. I mean, databases is not different than any other journalistic. I just use that information and I combine it with other information from other places. So we use a lot of experts too, yes.
Any more questions? No, I think now it's really time for lunch. In that case, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Helena. I think it was very inspirational presentation for all of us, and maybe in a year or two, you won't be so alone, only you and Guardian in Europe. I'm sure that if I will have chance, will try to organize something like that in Croatia. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you.